Good morning. Welcome to NTD.
Good morning. Here are our top stories today. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says gaps are narrowing for a hostage deal in Qatar. The top diplomat is now in Israel with the UN Security Council set to vote on a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire, the latest in the Israel-Hamas war.
A judge in Trump's New York fraud case ordered 3 years of court monitoring over the Trump Organization's finances yesterday. This as the deadline to pay a massive bond approaches.
A video goes viral of illegal immigrants breaking through a border fence in Texas, pushing and knocking guards down. Plus, DHS paperwork resulted in nearly 200,000 deportation cases being thrown out during President Biden's term. An update on the border crisis.
16 Republican-led states fired up over the Biden administration's ban on LNG export applications take their complaint to court. More on the case.
Ever heard the phrases Uni-Party or Drain the Swamp? An organization is launching a school that trains staffers to promote conservative policies. Find out their priorities.
The Wall Street debut of President Trump's Truth Social network could give him stock worth billions of dollars. But can he cash it out right away? NTD business host Don Ma explains.
Spring is in full bloom at London's world-famous Kew Gardens. The World Heritage Site is adding a new festival with stunning flowers and specially composed music.
This is NTD Good Morning. Live from our global headquarters, here are Evelyn Lee and Kevin Hogan.
Welcome to NTD.
Welcome, everyone. We have made it to Friday. It's March 22nd.
Yes, weekend coming up, and hopefully those hostage deal negotiators can come up with something right now because their last couple tries came up empty-handed.
Right. According to Israel, one of the proposals were a 42-day truce in exchange for the release of, and also the release of around 40 hostages. Well, this is today's top news because Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel today to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli War Cabinet.
Blinken in Egypt yesterday said gaps are narrowing in negotiations for a hostage and ceasefire deal. Here's Blinken on the hostage crisis.
We've been working, as you know, with Egypt, with Qatar, and with Israel to put a strong proposal on the table. Hamas responded to that. The negotiators continue to work. The gaps are narrowing, and we're continuing to push for an agreement in Doha. There's still difficult work to get there, but I continue to believe it's possible.
Blinken also said the U.S. and Saudi Arabia have made good progress in talks on normalizing ties with Israel. He called it a historic opportunity for two nations. Saudi Arabia wants a Palestinian state to be part of any deal.
The visit comes as the UN Security Council is set to vote on a U.S.-sponsored resolution on the need for a Gaza ceasefire, and talks in Qatar for a ceasefire hostage deal are underway.
Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is set to meet Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant next week at the Pentagon to discuss the war and security in the region.
The Pentagon says a range of topics will be covered, including hostages, humanitarian aid, and a plan for Rafah. It will be the first face-to-face meeting between the defense ministers since the start of the war.
And for more analysis, we're bringing in Ari Lightstone, the former advisor to the U.S. ambassador to Israel and former special envoy for the Abraham Accords. Good morning. Good to see you, Ari. So first, Blinken landed in Israel this morning. What will be the main message that Blinken brings to Israel?
Well, he's going to again try to convince Israel that it needs to stop pursuing finishing the war and defeating Hamas and Rafah.
Right, pretty straightforward, and we have seen this repeatedly. And Blinken is also working towards a two-state solution, since Saudi Arabia wants that to be part of any deal, as we have just heard. At the same time, Blinken wants to avoid the Rafah offensive, as you've said. So how does Israel see either of those goals? And if anything, is it maybe fair to say that these two events are at least mutually exclusive for Netanyahu?
They're mutually exclusive for any Israeli government right now. President Herzog, already 3.5 months ago, spoke about the concept of forming peace with Saudi Arabia as a strategic priority, but not today. There's a war that's being conducted today. There are hostages that are still kept hostage for more now than 170 days. And what Secretary of State Blinken, maybe he realizes it, but I doubt that he does, is every time he is saying that Israel must ceasefire and agree to a ceasefire and propose a proposal for a ceasefire, he hurts Israel's negotiating. He thinks he's bringing a deal closer to fruition. He's pushing it much further away. What do I mean by that? If Hamas wants somebody to do their negotiating for them, they want to survive another day. Every time Secretary of State Blinken says, you can't go into Rafah, you've already accomplished Hamas's goal, so why would they negotiate?
So what do you think is behind that? Because the U.S. is getting increasingly confrontational. What is behind that strategy, if you will?
Yeah, 100,000 voters in Michigan. That's apparently the cost of your values and soul if you are a Democratic leader right now. For the goal of trying to retain an electoral victory, which I think is still highly unlikely, willing to sell out the United States' greatest ally in the Middle East. And worse than that, if you can imagine something worse than that, every other ally throughout the Middle East and beyond is watching what the United States of America is doing right now, and they are questioning their desire to have the U.S. as their number one ally. Every single ally of ours right now is deciding maybe we should have additional conversations with China, because while we might not like them, they're certainly going to be more reliable in the long run.
And Yoav Gallant, as we have heard, will be traveling to Washington. He will reportedly also be bringing a list of weapons that they need from the U.S. So how do you expect the U.S. could use this as leverage?
Oh, this is their leverage. Israel has an active front on the north with Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's a larger, much more scary and powerful force than Hamas in Gaza. And Israel's expended an enormous amount of armaments already in Gaza, and therefore, in order to be able to defend itself and to defeat Hezbollah in the north, it will need a consistent and constant resupply of weaponry from the United States of America. And the U.S. has already been slow-walking those weapons, and I'm positive behind closed doors they're threatening not to renew them at all unless Israel marches to the beat of its drum. And you'll see this with the UN resolution that the United States of America is spearheading today at the UN.
So let's go back for a moment about the two-state solution. So do you think Netanyahu is open to this, to a two-state solution, and under which circumstances?
Today, 88% of Israel, it doesn't matter whether it's Netanyahu or Gantz, people like to say Bibi is the problem, and that's the roadmap that the Democrats are laying out right now. Israel is united that it must defeat Hamas in Gaza. Israel is united in the fact that the result of October 7th cannot, must not, should not, and will not be a Palestinian state. Could there be a Palestinian state in the future under different circumstances? Absolutely. And intelligent people will be able to decide whether that makes sense or it doesn't make sense. But nobody, unless you're trying to win an election in Michigan, would push for a Palestinian state today in Israel. There's not a single Israeli that is in favor of that.
Thank you so much for weighing in on that. I appreciate your insights as always. Thanks, Ari Lightstone.
Have a good day.
And a NATO military delegation visited Kyiv yesterday.
That's a first since the start of the Russian invasion in 2022.
The delegation attended the annual Kyiv Security Forum and met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine's army chief.
The delegation was led by Admiral Rob Bauer, chairman of NATO's military committee. He said the visit shows NATO and Ukraine are closer than ever.
Bauer said President Putin's fear of democracy lies at the heart of the conflict. The official warned Ukraine against becoming overly pessimistic in 2024 and stressed that pessimists don't win wars.
Zelensky described Bauer's visit as a strong signal of support for the Ukrainian society.
Back here in the U.S., over 100 illegal immigrants broke through a border fence in El Paso, Texas yesterday, pushing and knocking guards down.
The New York Post says it saw around 600 migrants gathered with Texas National Guard soldiers trying to separate them into smaller groups. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has an update on the border crisis.
In a video that's gone viral, the illegal border crossers can be seen pushing guards over to get past them to a second wall. The New York Post says it saw men in winter jackets and gloves, first pulling down a razor wire fence. 5 guards, some with rifles but greatly outnumbered, can be seen trying to hold the group back. The Post reporter on scene described it as absolute chaos on X. A Border Patrol official said the group was taken to a processing center. Fox News' Bill Maloogian said on X that Texas law enforcement made 1 arrest for assaulting a soldier, with more arrests for destruction of property and assaults likely coming. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's office stated Texas authorities quickly gained control of the situation and are working to repair damage. A new report by the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, or TRAC, found nearly 200,000 deportation cases have been thrown out during President Biden's administration because the Department of Homeland Security hadn't filed the necessary court appearance paperwork. The March 20th report details the rates of deportation cases being upended when authorities fail to file a key document known as a Notice to Appear, or NTA. TRAC found immigration judges dismissed over 33,000 deportation cases in fiscal year 2021 for lacking proper NTA paperwork, close to 80,000 in fiscal year 2022, and around 70,000 in fiscal 2023. TRAC data shows roughly 10,000 deportation cases thrown out so far for fiscal year 2024. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
The Trump campaign is getting a cash boost from a donor who previously sent $20 million to a group backing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Robert Bigelow is the founder of Bigelow Aerospace. He sent a $5 million donation to MAGA Inc. on February 9th. It was the largest multiple million-dollar check MAGA Inc. pulled in during February. Bigelow was the largest founder of DeSantis' bid for the GOP's presidential nomination. In 2023, he gave $20 million to a super PAC supporting Mr. DeSantis. Yesterday, various committees associated with former President Donald Trump published their financial reports with the Federal Election Commission, showing their February activities. 3 organizations reported they collectively had about $63 million in cash on hand at the end of February. And a judge in Trump's New York fraud case ordered 3 years of court monitoring over the Trump Organization's finances yesterday.
The court monitor will have access to the company's accounting records, financial reporting policies, and more.
The order requires Trump's company to disclose attempts to gain surety bonds with quarterly reports. The Trump Organization will need to give notice of at least 5 business days for major transfers and provide monthly bank statements.
The company also needs to tell the monitor of any debt restructuring. The order comes as Trump says it's been impossible to get a bond for the $454 million judgment to appeal. And the deadline is looming for former President Trump to pay an enormous bond in the New York civil fraud case, and the state is preparing to seize his properties. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards has the story.
In just days, former President Trump could lose control over his New York and Westchester properties if he doesn't pay the massive civil fraud judgment plus interest. Attorney General Letitia James is eyeing Trump's Westchester golf course and private estate called Seven Springs. Since March 6th, just 1 week after Judge Arthur Engoron made his $454 million decision, James has filed judgments with the Westchester County Clerk. Entering a judgment is the first step a creditor would take to attempt to recover property. Additional steps include putting liens on assets or moving to foreclose on properties. Taking other actions in court would follow if the asset is going to be seized. The Attorney General's move will allow her to more easily secure liens on those properties. Judgments against Trump's New York City properties are automatically entered. James has previously said she's prepared to start seizing Trump's assets if he misses the March 25th deadline. In a filing on Thursday, Trump's attorneys rejected the AG's suggestion on how he could pay the bond. The AG, in her own filing Wednesday, suggested that Trump could put his real estate up as collateral or get lower bond amounts from several surety companies. Trump's attorneys argue that James shouldn't be allowed to challenge their claims because she didn't dispute any of their claims, such as that posting a bond of this magnitude would require cash or cash equivalents approaching $1 billion, and that Chubb Insurance Company notified defendants that it could not accept real property as collateral. Meanwhile, Judge Arthur Engoron has expanded the role of the monitor overseeing the Trump Organization. In a new order, Engoron gave the monitor additional oversight of Trump's internal financial practices. The Trump monitor also has the authority to review Trump's efforts to obtain bonds. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, the deadline to avoid a partial government shutdown is today. Congress is facing an uphill battle to pass $1 trillion funding package that was released just yesterday.
Embattled U.S. Senator Bob Menendez says he'll run for re-election in November, but not as a Democrat.
And liquid gas is at the heart of a new legal battle uniting 16 Republican-led states. Why they're suing the Biden administration when we come back.
Welcome back. Senator Bob Menendez said yesterday he won't run for re-election as a Democrat this year, but kept the door open to an independent bid.
Menendez is facing charges of accepting bribes, acting as a foreign agent, and obstructing justice.
The senator has faced calls to resign, including from members of his own party, but has resisted. Prosecutors allege that he took bribes from New Jersey businessmen to impede law enforcement probes into them and worked as an agent of the Egyptian government.
Menendez has denied the charges against him and said he'll prove his innocence. His trial will take place this summer. Menendez's seat is up for re-election in November, and more than a dozen people have filed to run.
Lawmakers have unveiled a new $1.2 trillion funding package to avert a partial government shutdown.
Time is running out, though, with today being the deadline. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has the story.
With over 1,000 pages of text to get through, Congress faces an uphill battle to get the measure over the finish line. If the bill is not passed by Friday at midnight, critical departments like Defense, Homeland Security, Labor, Health, and Education will face another delay in funding. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said the bill came in the nick of time, but admitted meeting the deadline will not be easy.
Even with bipartisanship, it's going to be a tight squeeze to get this funding package passed.
House Speaker Mike Johnson praised the plan and the efforts of lawmakers who created it.
We've been very, very consistent, very adamant that we had to get our government funded. We had to get the appropriations process done.
But several lawmakers have opposed the deal, saying they need more time to read exactly what the text contains.
We continue the pattern of Republicans have a majority and we pass major spending bills, predominantly with Democrat votes. More troubling would be that most Republicans, it seems, are going to vote for the bill tomorrow, irrespective of what's in it, regardless of what bad policies are being maintained.
Congressman Rob Anderholt of Alabama said he's concerned about provisions in the bill to create new social services for illegal immigrants. Congressman Chip Roy called the bill an abomination.
I just want to be very clear. Any Republican that votes for this bill is voting for the mass releases under parole that led to the death of Lake and Riley.
The bill looks on track to pass in the House with vast Democratic support. But rushing a vote on the bill before the deadline could backfire. In the Senate, a unanimous consent vote fails if a single person objects. Senator Rand Paul may be that person.
The point isn't really about the process of whether it's Friday or Saturday or Sunday. It's whether or not someone stands up and says the emperor has no clothes, the country has no money.
When asked if he would seek to block the bill, Paul said, "We'll see." Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
16 Republican-led states are suing the federal government. They are challenging a ban on new export applications for liquefied natural gas.
The states argue the federal government lacks the authority to broadly deny those permits.
The lawsuit was filed by the Republican attorneys general from a number of states, including Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. They say the Department of Energy's pause on exports will harm the economy.
The Biden administration said in January the pause will allow for a review of economic and environmental impacts of LNG exports.
The state said the pause oversteps the Department of Energy's authority under the Natural Gas Act.
The initial review is expected to last months.
Is the Chinese Communist Party using underhanded means to pressure other countries and their economies to become dependent on the regime?
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill investigated the subject at a hearing yesterday. NTD's Jack Bradley has more.
The Chinese regime's economic coercion, coupled with its expanding surveillance, is causing increasing concern among America and its allies. At a hearing today by the Foreign Affairs Committee, members of Congress examined the economic threat of China's hold on critical minerals to produce semiconductors, something highly important to the American economy and military.
They are an adversary, and that in not only the Indochina Sea, but throughout the Pacific, and they obviously are aligned with Russia in the Ukrainian war, and continue to make threats toward Taiwan.
I believe that trade is important as long as it's conditioned on human rights respect. I chair the China Commission. We focused on this horrific practice of forced organ harvesting. It's my third hearing on that. I have a bill that passed bipartisan, sitting over in the Senate since March 28th of last year. Only 2 people in the whole House voted against it to really rein in on an egregious practice. Everywhere you look, name the human rights abuse, Xi Jinping is excelling in it, and of course he's threatening Taiwan.
Over 300,000 Chinese national students are at our top universities with unfettered access, as their scientists have been admitting to American technologies in AI and hypersonic development, things that can be used and weaponized against us. Some of the most transformative technologies we've ever seen in human history are being stolen from us.
Some members of Congress blame the economic woes on the Biden administration's policies, bringing up the recent pause on new American liquefied natural gas exports.
The President's recent decision to ban LNG export permits is a perfect example of a policy that harms U.S. business interests and U.S. foreign policy.
The war on fossil fuel is real, and it's costing us, every American family, dollars at the pump, and it's going up. This fantasy executive order or a rule that wants to make a huge percentage of our cars electric by 2032, it's fantasy. The grid won't handle it.
As the U.S. works to counter the Chinese Communist Party's economic influence, it's clear that most officials here agree that more needs to be done. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Jack Bradley, NTD News.
Just ahead, a brutal beating leaves a teen in critical condition. The Attorney General in her state is placing part of the blame on the DEI programs in her school. More on that investigation.
A nonprofit is launching a program that trains Capitol Hill staffers to promote conservative policies. Why a top Republican lawmaker calls it a game changer after the break. Welcome back. Did a school DEI program play a role in a brutal attack that left a 16-year-old girl fighting for her life?
Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey has announced an investigation into a Missouri school district, which he says bears significant responsibility for the incident.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the attack and Bailey's line of reasoning, and a caution to viewers: this story contains footage some viewers may find disturbing.
The video of a fight between 2 girls that quickly took a dark turn has sparked outrage and concern. The head of teenager Kaylee Gain was repeatedly smashed into the concrete. As her body convulses on the ground after the assault, no one offers help as fighting between others continues. The 16-year-old suffered a fractured skull, resulting in brain swelling and bleeding. She still hasn't gained consciousness, almost 2 weeks after the violent beating, and is in critical condition. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey wrote on X that he is launching an investigation into Hazelwood School District after the senseless beating of a student in broad daylight. Bailey is accusing the school district of prioritizing political narrative over student safety. The attack took place outside the school. Bailey is criticizing the district for not having any school resource officers on the scene to protect the victim or restore order. According to Bailey, this is due to a conflict with the police over the DEI requirements of the district. Bailey says the school district required the uniformed police officers who were in the schools to take the district's DEI training, and the police agencies refused. The Attorney General said they were removed from the school as a result. Bailey said the school is, quote, more in favor of racial divisiveness than having school resource officers on their campuses. He poses a question. What role did what he called a radical divisive DEI indoctrination program play in preventing a police officer from being present? A 15-year-old girl has been charged in the incident. Her family described her as an honor student with a great record at Hazelwood East High School. They say she was defending herself from bullying and started a fundraiser to help out with her legal defense. A GoFundMe campaign raised nearly $3,000 out of the $150,000 goal before being removed for violating the platform's terms of service. The funds were later returned to the donors. NTD reached out to Hazelwood School District for comment. We are still waiting to hear back from them. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
From carjackings to homicides, Washington, D.C. has seen a dramatic rise in violent crime over the past year, especially in Ward 6, which includes the Capitol Hill.
NTD's Sam Wong spoke with D.C. residents to find out what they think about the city's public safety.
2023 was a turbulent year for Capitol Hill staffers.
In September, I hosted a security briefing where we heard from 2 staff members who were mugged at gunpoint just down the street.
Located at the heart of Washington, D.C., Ward 6 is considered a relatively affluent and safe part of town. This area not only covers federal landmarks like the U.S. Capitol, it's also home to a growing number of residential and commercial buildings. But the safety situation has been eroding in recent years. In 2023, Ward 6 saw a 188% increase in homicides, 57% increase in carjacking, and 44% increase in violent crime. That's according to the chairman of the D.C. Police Union, who testified at a congressional hearing Thursday. He said law enforcement officers are stepping down at a record pace due to anti-police laws and rhetoric coming from the city council.
Since the beginning of 2020, the MPD has lost 1,426 officers, more than 1/3 of the department. 540 of those separations, nearly 40%, were resignations.
I asked some D.C. residents if they feel safe living in the city. Here's what they said.
Crime is pretty much targeted and limited to certain populations that are disadvantaged.
The reason why people are not feeling safe because the crime that's happening is happening near affluent neighborhoods now.
Janae is a hairstylist who lives near the Capitol. She told me someone once tried to break into her home while her teenage daughter was there alone. To Janae, safety has become more than just a see you later conversation. It's now a demand.
I have a teenage daughter, and it's like as soon as she gets out of school, I'm like, okay, as soon as you get home, call me.
This is like a relatively safe neighborhood.
Supposedly.
While many other major cities saw downturns in violent crimes, D.C. saw a 36% jump in homicides last year, and carjacking nearly doubled. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Sam Wong, NTD News.
You often hear phrases like drain the swamp or fight the uniparty. Find out what that means and learn about a new push to advance policies in Washington. We speak to Hugh Fike, the Director of Government Relations at the Conservative Partnership Institute, about breaking news at his organization, a school equipping staffers to do just that.
Well, thanks for having me on. The Conservative Partnership Academy is part of Conservative Partnership Institute, where we've formalized our trainings, our fellowships, our intern program, and our retreats to help weaponize the conservative staff to advance conservative policies in D.C.
Excellent. Yeah, and Representative Chip Roy of Texas, he's talking about the need to combat the swamp, and he's talking about the uniparty. So what is a challenge that is presented by these two things?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Congressman Chip Roy is former staffer on Capitol Hill and has seen the policy and the strategic battles up very close, and now as a member of Congress doing that in the arena, which is great. And what we want to do is basically show that conservative staff that there's an opportunity for them to fight the good fight alongside other conservatives on Capitol Hill and around the conservative movement. So we provide them with trainings, we provide them with fellowships and the things that they're going to need in order to advance conservative policies on Capitol Hill. So we do a lot of trainings regarding issue areas that conservatives face on the Hill, as well as how the House operates, how the Senate operates, and best ways for them to leverage influence with their bosses.
Okay, so give us a little bit of a snapshot of what that training would entail, a specific.
Yeah, so actually we're just about to start today a 3-class session on appropriations. So we'll do House appropriations, we'll do Senate appropriations, and then we'll also talk about the president's budget and OMB, which a lot of people don't know, but is a very important part of the appropriations process. So that's just one class out of many that we offer here in D.C. to conservative staff.
Yeah, definitely. And Senator Mike Lee of Utah, he's saying that the program is a game changer. So big stuff. Is there a need for patriots in leadership positions in this country right now? And how does your program foster that?
Yeah, without a doubt. That's a huge part of the need in Capitol Hill and Washington, D.C. is more patriots, conservatives, those that are willing to fight the swamp and really work to drain it. So we want to help them recognize that there are more of us here in D.C. that are fighting the good fight, come alongside them, provide them with the tools and the trainings that they need in order to advance the issues on Capitol Hill. So that's what we're here to do.
Definitely, and you're attracting some really big names here. Mark Meadows, a former chief of staff for former President Trump, he's expected to join in the program. What are the most pressing issues for conservative right now, and how are they going to be addressed?
Yeah, former Congressman Meadows and Chief of Staff to President Trump is a great partner. He's obviously a senior partner here at CPI, and he's helping kind of shape and provide input into what the programming should look like, and has already participated. So he's been coming alongside us. So I think the biggest thing, and one thing that he has very good experience with, is providing the leadership and showing conservatives on Capitol how to be leaders and what they need to do in critical times and positions, how to staff their boss, how to give advice to their boss, and then ultimately support them when they make the tough decisions.
Well, thank you so much for giving us an update on this. Hugh Fike, Director of Government Relations at the Conservative Partnership Institute.
Thanks for having me.
Stay with us. The Wall Street debut of President Trump's Truth Social network could give him stock worth billions of dollars. Will he be able to use that money to help pay his massive financial burdens?
In a historic antitrust lawsuit, the Justice Department is taking on one of the largest tech companies in the world, coming up with their targeting and what it could mean for you. Thank you for staying with us. We have NTD Business host Don Ma with us now to give us the latest updates from the financial world.
Don, what's going on with former President Trump's likely IPO?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. And on that topic, we should also mention Wall Street hitting record highs yet again. And of course, Reddit going public. So let's start with Trump. So the Wall Street debut of Donald Trump's Truth Social network could give him stock worth billions of dollars, but the former president probably won't be able to cash it out right away. So Trump's pending return to Wall Street comes down to a vote scheduled for today, actually, by shareholders of a company named Digital World Acquisition. And the corporation hopes to actually merge with Trump Media and Technology Group. So this is the company that's actually behind Truth Social. So if the shareholders approve this deal, Trump Media and Technology Group could soon see its stock trading on the NASDAQ, and this vote looks likely to pass, actually, given how high Digital World stock has jumped on excitement about Trump. And Trump owns most of the new combined company, with the total potential value surpassing $3 billion. And of course, it's a lot of money, some of which he might need amid his legal troubles, but it's unlikely Trump can take it out right away and sell his shares until at least probably 6 months later.
Got it. Yeah, quite the jump. People are getting flashbacks to the meme stock craze from 2021. And on the topic of companies going public, you mentioned Reddit.
Yes, exactly. So Reddit stock soared, it seems like, yesterday in its Wall Street debut as investors pushed the value of the company close to $9 billion. And this is in mere seconds after it began trading on the New York Stock Exchange. So Reddit, which was priced its IPO at $34 a share, debuted Thursday afternoon at $47 a share. And then at the close of trading, it was up to $50.44, backing off a peak of $57.80. Though this volatility sort of not surprising because there has been a lot of buzz around Reddit. But however, the tech industry, by their standards, Reddit remains extraordinarily small for a company that has been around for so long. Now, if you compare that to, for example, Meta, Microsoft, yesterday's opening debut valuation of $9 billion is still far below the $1.2 trillion market value boasted by those platforms I mentioned just now. That's including Meta, whose biggest social media service, Facebook, was just started actually 18 months earlier than Reddit. So not a lot of difference here. So yesterday merely marks Reddit's first day on the public market. So the first real key measure of success is actually going to boil down to the company's first earnings report.
You can just look up so much on Reddit. And you know who's a big shareholder in Reddit is OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. He had $400 million worth, and now it's up to $600 million. So what about Wall Street? You said it's hitting record highs.
Yeah, in fact, a second day in a row. So Wall Street's major 3 indexes on Thursday registered record closing highs. And this comes after, as I mentioned to you yesterday morning, actually, that the Federal Reserve reassured investors about the prospects for rate cuts this year. And at the same time, chip stocks rallied after Micron Technology's upbeat forecast. So the 3 major indexes yesterday had also hit fresh intraday record highs earlier on Thursday, and the Dow ended the day less than 1% away from the 40,000 mark for the first time. So economic data released earlier yesterday also added to investors' bullish moods, and the number of Americans filing for new claims for unemployment benefits unexpectedly fell last week. So another good data point, while sales of previously owned homes increased by the most in a year in February. So the signs of the economy remaining on solid footing in the first quarter is there. And it seems like the economy continues to defy expectations, and markets apparently loving it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you called it yesterday, if I remember correctly. Definitely a lot of optimism in the market. But thank you so much, Don Ma, for your insights again.
Thank you.
And the Justice Department is taking on one of the world's biggest tech giants, filing a historic antitrust lawsuit against Apple. The suit targets a product used by hundreds of millions of people, the iPhone. Here's the report.
It's one of the most iconic, powerful brands in the world, now worth more than $2.5 trillion. It's sold more than 1 billion iPhones worldwide. And Apple's ability to maintain that hold on the marketplace has put it squarely in the crosshairs of the U.S. Justice Department, filing a sweeping antitrust lawsuit against Apple, accusing the tech giant of illegally monopolizing the smartphone market.
For consumers, that has meant fewer choices, higher prices and fees, lower quality smartphones, apps, and accessories, and less innovation from Apple and its competitors.
At the heart of the antitrust suit, the allegation that Apple has set up its own closed ecosystem that limits Apple users to only using Apple products. That's also known as the walled garden. At the center of the walled garden, the iPhone.
And that's really, the centerpiece of Apple's empire. It's what has made it such a dominant company for so long.
One example of unfair practices alleged by the Justice Department, that Apple degrades the text that iPhones receive from Android phones, those green texts iPhones get from non-iPhones. Another example of what the Justice Department calls Apple's, quote, exclusionary conduct. These days, good luck trying to use anything but Apple Pay if you're using your phone at the checkout counter.
Apple has blocked third-party developers from creating competing digital wallets on the iPhone that use what is known as tap-to-pay functionality.
And Justice says Apple Watches only work well with iPhones, forcing owners to buy nothing but Apple phones. The Justice Department says unlocking more competition for Apple products will lead to more innovation and lower prices for consumers.
Coming up, spring is in full bloom at London's world-famous Kew Gardens. The World Heritage Site is adding a new festival with stunning flowers and specially composed music.
And family celebrations, dinners, and gatherings are all brought together with food. We speak to one chef and author about her new book and how she blends flavor and happiness. Stay tuned for that after the break. Welcome back. An early spring has arrived at the world-famous Royal Botanic Gardens in London. This World Heritage Site attracts millions of visitors every year.
The site hopes to attract even more visitors this year with a new festival featuring specially written music. Let's take a look.
The Royal Botanic Gardens, also known as Kew Gardens, was founded in 1840. It's one of the most important and famous gardens in the world. It features over 50,000 plants. The London Gardens already have stunning displays of cherry and magnolia blossoms and many others.
And we've got blossom everywhere. The beautiful pinks and whites of apples are really looking amazing. But as well as those, we've got underplantings, you've got daffodils, you've got scilla, we've got all these beautiful spring flowers just popping up, and the season's really starting to go now.
This year, the gardens are trying something new. They're having their first ever Blossom Festival. In addition to the lovely blossoms everywhere, the music of several musicians from the Royal College of Music will be featured around the gardens.
So there's 6 different locations in the gardens and 6 different composers, and they've come here to take inspiration from those locations. They've gone away and created bespoke pieces for each of those locations.
While the early arrival of spring blossoms is a welcome sight to visitors, it does present a bit more of a challenge to gardeners there.
What it does mean is these trees have to kind of get through a longer season until they can go back to sleep into dormancy. So we just need to make sure they've got enough food and enough water. So just checking those sorts of things to make sure they can keep going for as long as possible.
Kew Gardens also has many other attractions, such as the world's oldest potted plant brought to England in 1775, and a 750,000 volume library. They offer workshops on botanical drawing, and even have part of the London Bridge there. The Sounds of Blossom Festival opens Saturday and runs until April 14th.
That's a big potted plant.
Yeah, I was going to say, they just casually mentioned it on the side. A potted plant from 1775. That's awesome.
Yeah. And one of the most important elements of celebrating a special moment or just spending time with family is the food.
Absolutely. And I spoke to Debbie Wilson-Berment, also known as Chef Sagajo, a private chef and author. I asked her how she uses cooking to spread a more positive message. Take a look.
You know, one of the things that I enjoy a lot about cooking is, when you cook a meal, you just don't cook it for yourselves. You think of others. You think of let's just say, like, for instance, if I'm entertaining, I think of the company that I'm having. I think of the people that are going to be coming to sit and eat this delicious meal that I've prepared. So I think more of my guests, and I try to incorporate what they like and just up the flavor profile. I love doing that. It's just part of who I am. Cooking is just pleasurable for me.
And it's also, the way it sounds, it's a way for you to bring people together. It's the experience.
Yes, it's the experience, the whole experience, no matter what it is, enjoy the experience, enjoy your guests, and set the ambiance that will impress your guests, have them feel welcome. It's one of the first things that anyone should do.
If you had to summarize it, because the book is called Sagajo Experience, so if you had to summarize it, what is the Sagajo Experience?
Sagajo Experience is just the enjoyment of entertaining with your friends and your family, bringing people closer together, enjoying the meal that was prepared for you, making this symbolization of food, the creative, the whole flavor profile, and just the experience of everyone happy and enjoying themselves. That's the experience that I want people to feel when they, come to my home or when I cater for them. So, to me, it's it's just pleasurable to do what I do. I love doing what I do. The passion shows in my food, and I just hope everyone enjoys it.
And your book isn't just a collection of recipes, right? What would you describe it as?
I would describe it as the same thing, just the experience, the entertaining part of it, the cultural part of it, because there are different recipes inside of there. There's baking, there's cooking, there's slow cooking, there's duck, there's chicken, there's so many different things. You know, there's also cooking with a little bit of beer in there. There's a ton of flavor throughout my book.
Wow, I look forward to trying all those. Thank you so much, Debbie Wilson-Berman. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, Evelyn. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, food, I think, is a great way to bring people together. And it's the easiest way, you know, to bring your culture closer to another person.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And they say the secret ingredient is love.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I can agree with that.
And the thoughts.bind.com says that cooking with love is like a mindfulness. It's being present and really enjoying transforming all those ingredients.
Yeah, maybe that's why mom's recipes always taste the best.
Yep.
All right, we're heading to the second part now of our broadcast. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a minute.
There are real consequences to controlled media. And NTD's founders know them firsthand. Our freedom of thought is the price. This is the lesson that guides us in everything we do.
Yeah, so there's the tear gas there.
We know the value of a free society. And we take seriously the responsibility to preserve it. We are NTD.
Good morning. Welcome to NTD.
Good morning. Here are today's top stories. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says gaps are narrowing for a hostage deal in Qatar. The top diplomat is now in Israel with the UN Security Council set to vote on a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire today. The latest in the Israel-Hamas war. A brutal beating leaves a teen in critical condition. The Attorney General in her state is placing part of the blame on the DEI programs in her school. More on that investigation.
The Justice Department coming after Apple. The DOJ alleges the tech giant is trying to keep a monopoly on the market for smartphones. Analysis on whether this is good for business or will hurt innovation.
Veterans of a clandestine World War II military unit known as a Ghost Army honored at the U.S. Capitol. More on their mission and heroic deeds.
Sometimes man's best friend is also dog's best friend. Hear the story of how one dog helped save another from drowning.
This is NTD Good Morning. Live from our global headquarters, here are Evelyn Lee and Kevin Hogan.
Welcome to NTD.
Welcome everyone and happy Friday. Today is March 22nd. Today's top news. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Israel today to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli War Cabinet.
Blinken in Egypt yesterday said gaps are narrowing in negotiations for a hostage and ceasefire deal. Here's Blinken on the hostage crisis.
We've been working, as you know, with Egypt, with Qatar, and with Israel to put a strong proposal on the table. Hamas responded to that. The negotiators continue to work. The gaps are narrowing, and we're continuing to push for an agreement in Doha. There's still difficult work to get there, but I continue to believe it's possible.
Blinken also said the U.S. and Saudi Arabia have made good progress in talks on normalizing ties with Israel. He called it a historic opportunity for two nations. Saudi Arabia wants a Palestinian state to be part of any deal.
The visit comes as the UN Security Council is set to vote on a U.S.-sponsored resolution on the need for a Gaza ceasefire, and talks in Qatar for a ceasefire hostage deal are underway.
Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is set to meet Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant next week at the Pentagon to discuss the war and security in the region.
The Pentagon says a range of topics will be covered, including hostages, humanitarian aid, and a plan for Rafah. It will be the first face-to-face meeting between the defense ministers since the start of the war.
A NATO military delegation visited Kyiv yesterday.
That's a first since the start of the Russian invasion in 2022.
The delegation attended the annual Kyiv Security Forum and met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Ukraine's army chief.
The delegation was led by Admiral Rob Bauer, chairman of NATO's military committee. He said the visit shows NATO and Ukraine are closer than ever.
Bauer said President Putin's fear of democracy lies at the heart of the conflict. The official warned Ukraine against becoming overly pessimistic in 2024 and stressed that pessimists don't win wars.
Zelensky described Bauer's visit as a strong signal of support for the Ukrainian society.
And at the southern border of the U.S., over 100 illegal immigrants broke through a border fence in El Paso, Texas yesterday, pushing and knocking guards down.
The New York Post says it saw around 600 migrants gathered with Texas National Guard soldiers trying to separate them into smaller groups. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has an update on the border crisis.
In a video that's gone viral, the illegal border crossers can be seen pushing guards over to get past them to a second wall. The New York Post says it saw men in winter jackets and gloves, first pulling down a razor wire fence. 5 guards, some with rifles but greatly outnumbered, can be seen trying to hold the group back. The Post reporter on scene described it as absolute chaos on X. A Border Patrol official said the group was taken to a processing center. Fox News' Bill Malhusian said on X that Texas law enforcement made 1 arrest for assaulting a soldier, with more arrests for destruction of property and assaults likely coming. Texas Governor Greg Abbott's office stated Texas authorities quickly gained control of the situation and are working to repair damage. A new report by the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse, or TRAC, found nearly 200,000 deportation cases have been thrown out during President Biden's administration because the Department of Homeland Security hadn't filed the necessary court appearance paperwork. The March 20th report details the rates of deportation cases being upended when authorities fail to file a key document known as a Notice to Appear, or NTA. TRAC found immigration judges dismissed over 33,000 deportation cases in fiscal year 2021 for lacking proper NTA paperwork, close to 80,000 in fiscal year 2022, and around 70,000 in fiscal 2023. TRAC data shows roughly 10,000 deportation cases thrown out so far for fiscal year 2024. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
16 Republican-led states are suing the federal government. They're challenging a ban on new export applications for liquefied natural gas.
The states argue the federal government lacks the authority to broadly deny those permits.
The lawsuit was filed by the Republican attorneys general from a number of states, including Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. They say the Department of Energy's pause on exports will harm the economy.
The Biden administration said in January the pause will allow for a review of economic and environmental impacts of LNG exports.
The state said the pause oversteps the Department of Energy's authority under the Natural Gas Act.
The initial review is expected to last months.
A judge in Trump's New York fraud case ordered 3 years of court monitoring over the Trump organization's finances yesterday.
The court monitor will have access to the company's accounting records, financial reporting policies, and more.
The order requires Trump's company to disclose attempts to gain surety bonds with quarterly reports. The Trump organization will need to give notice of at least 5 business days for major transfers and provide monthly bank statements.
The company also needs to tell the monitor of any debt restructuring. The order comes as Trump says it's been impossible to get a bond for the $454 million judgment to appeal.
The Trump campaign is getting a cash boost from a donor who previously sent $20 million to a group backing Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Robert Bigelow is the founder of Bigelow Aerospace. He sent a $5 million donation to MAGA Inc. on February 9th. It was the largest multiple million-dollar check MAGA Inc. pulled in during February. Bigelow was the largest funder of DeSantis' bid for the GOP's presidential nomination. In 2023, he gave $20 million to a super PAC supporting Mr. DeSantis. Yesterday, various committees associated with former President Donald Trump published their financial reports with the Federal Election Commission showing their February activities. 3 organizations reported they collectively had about $63 million in cash on hand at the end of February. Senator Bob Menendez said yesterday he won't run for re-election as a Democrat this year, but kept the door open to an independent bid.
Menendez is facing charges of accepting bribes, acting as a foreign agent, and obstructing justice.
The senator has faced calls to resign, including from members of his own party, but has resisted. Prosecutors allege that he took bribes from New Jersey businessmen to impede law enforcement probes into them and worked as an agent of the Egyptian government.
Menendez has denied the charges against him and said he'll prove his innocence. His trial will take place this summer. Menendez's seat is up for re-election in November, and more than a dozen people have filed to run.
Up next, veterans of a clandestine World War II military unit known as the Ghost Army honored at the U.S. Capitol. More on their secret mission and heroic deeds.
Sometimes man's best friend can also be dog's best friend. How one dog rescues another struggling in water after the break.
Thanks for staying with us. A question: do you have an iPhone? The Justice Department and over a dozen states are hitting Apple with a lawsuit.
It's over anti-competitive practices. And we hear more on this from Robert Bork Jr., the president of the Antitrust Education Project and the president of the Bork Group. Robert, thank you for your time this morning. What makes this lawsuit against Apple stand out?
Well, first of all, this is the 4th lawsuit by the Biden administration, either from the DOJ or the FTC, against the big tech companies. This is I would say it was a trifecta, but I guess it's a quadrifecta. It's this is the big trophy case that they hope to win. But I got to say, having read it and watched the press conference yesterday when they announced it, this is nothing more than a train wreck before it's left the station. First of all, if you're going to bring a monopoly case against a company, you got to prove that they have a monopoly, which they really seem to be contorting themselves to try to prove. First of all, the monopoly they allege is in smartphones, but not just any smartphone. They're talking about performance smartphones. Those are the high-end, most expensive smartphones, which of course narrows the marketplace so that they can then allege a monopoly. They're not getting there with this. That's just not going to work. But, it takes a judge to say, yes, you can go forward. And a judge probably will let them go forward with it. But it's really kind of a stretch.
So they're trying to use these wording to kind of create their case here. Is there truth to the claims that in this lawsuit that Apple's engaging in anti-competitive behavior, like making those Android texts look not as good as the Apple messages, and then also causing new apps to be blocked? And if so, is that grounds for intervention?
Well, I think some of the stuff that they allege, is troublesome, but it doesn't require you to bring a lawsuit which wants to break up Apple. That's, I think, ultimately what they would like to do. This is the kind of thing where Apple has made changes in the past in Europe and elsewhere, and they would certainly do it here if allowed to do it, to negotiate something and negotiate some sort of remedy, perhaps even a fine, who knows, But that's not what the Justice Department wants. The Justice Department wants a trophy on the wall. This is more political theater than anything else. And I'll tell you, one thing that tells you that is that the case is really goes against antitrust precedent. And also because they invited the Attorney General of New Jersey to participate in not only the case, but to participate in the press conference. Now, the Attorney General of New Jersey is running for governor, as a Democrat running for governor. So there was no reason for him to be there, except to get some TV time. This is the whole of the Biden administration's antitrust enforcement is about overturning the last 45 years of very, very pro-consumer enforcement practices and changing the law to put the government more in control over business. I mean, essentially what the DOJ wants here is to turn your Apple phone into an Android phone. They want to make it open source. They just want to change the company in a way that is really going to change what Apple iPhones are.
And on that note, Robert, this isn't the first time that there have been concerns about being kind of sandboxed in, with the Fortnite maker Epic Games leveling that lawsuit back in May 2021, describing how they were trapped in this walled garden of the App Store. California Attorney General Rob Bonta, he hailed the lawsuit as pro-business. Doesn't seem like you align with that stance. Can you explain?
No, I can't. In fact, Epic lost the very claim that the DOJ is bringing in this case. So this has already been tried out in the courts and they've lost it, which makes me think again that this case is not going to go to trial for at least 3 years. These guys are going to be out of office, perhaps. So this is more about making a splash now pre-election than it is about actually bringing a real serious antitrust matter. And if they wanted to make changes, they didn't have to bring this kind of case. They could have negotiated settlements with Apple on various issues, but that doesn't have the PR value of trying to mount the iPhone over the mantelpiece next to Meta and Amazon and Google. I mean, right now this is all about racking up wins against the big four big tech companies, which frankly we can't afford some of the stuff that they're trying to do here, because if we're trying to get out from under the national debt, we need growth, and these are the four biggest contributors to American economic growth that we have.
Right.
Apple is the fourth biggest R&D spender, spends billions and billions of dollars on R&D and making competitive products that make us competitive around the world.
Right. And Robert, yeah, to your point, there are critics that say that this kind of lawsuit will prevent companies from innovating. Robert Bork Jr., president of the Antitrust Education Project and the president of the Bork Group, thank you for your perspective.
Thank you for having me.
In other news, did a school DEI program play a role in a brutal attack that left a 16-year-old girl fighting for her life?
Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey has announced an investigation into a Missouri school district which he says bears significant responsibility for the incident.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the attack and Bailey's line of reasoning. And just a caution to the viewers at this point, this story contains footage some viewers might find disturbing.
The video of a fight between two girls that quickly took a dark turn has sparked outrage and concern. The head of teenager Kaylee Gain was repeatedly smashed into the concrete. As her body convulses on the ground after the assault, no one offers help as fighting between others continues. The 16-year-old suffered a fractured skull, resulting in brain swelling and bleeding. She still hasn't gained consciousness, almost 2 weeks after the violent beating, and is in critical condition. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey wrote on X that he is launching an investigation into Hazelwood School District after the senseless beating of a student in broad daylight. Bailey is accusing the school district of prioritizing political narrative over student safety. The attack took place outside the school. Bailey is criticizing the district for not having any school resource officers on the scene to protect the victim or restore order. According to Bailey, this is due to a conflict with the police over the DEI requirements of the district. Bailey says the school district required the uniformed police officers who were in the schools to take the district's DEI training, and the police agencies refused. The Attorney General said they were removed from the school as a result. Bailey said the school is, quote, more in favor of racial divisiveness than having school resource officers on their campuses. He poses a question. What role did what he called a radical divisive DEI indoctrination program play in preventing a police officer from being present? A 15-year-old girl has been charged in the incident. Her family described her as an honor student with a great record at Hazelwood East High School. They say she was defending herself from bullying and started a fundraiser to help out with her legal defense. A GoFundMe campaign raised nearly $3,000 out of the $150,000 goal before being removed for violating the platform's terms of service. The funds were later returned to the donors. NTD reached out to Hazelwood School District for comment. We are still waiting to hear back from them. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
During the Second World War, American military units used a whole host of tricks to help outwit the enemy and turn the tide.
The units have been dubbed the Ghost Army, and yesterday they were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in Washington. Here's the story.
For decades, their mission was kept a secret. These American servicemen used inflatable tanks, trucks, and planes, combined with sound effects, costume uniforms, and acting. Their efforts earned them the name Ghost Army. 3 of the 7 known surviving members attended a ceremony Thursday at the U.S. Capitol. Many family members of Ghost Army veterans were also in attendance to accept the honor for their relatives who have since passed away. John Borders was in a sonic deception unit during the war. This unit was tasked with producing transmissions to indicate fictitious troop movements and fool the Germans.
So they made sounds of just every sound of war, with tanks going over roadways, with men washing up and swearing at each other. So they made all those sounds that they transmitted. He passed away when I was in high school. So he couldn't talk about the Ghost Army because it was top secret.
The bill to honor the units with the Congressional Gold Medal was signed by President Biden in 2022. That came after years of work by family members of the soldiers and a filmmaker who helped bring their story to light after their mission was declassified in 1996. The Ghost Army included about 1,300 soldiers who carried out about 20 battlefield deceptions in France, Luxembourg, Belgium, Germany, and Italy. One of the biggest missions came in March 1945, when they drew German units away from a point on the Rhine River where the army was actually crossing.
They don't know how many lives they saved. They guess thousands, but there's no way to tell.
Rena Syracuse is the daughter of Richard Michael Syracuse. He was in a platoon that did reconnaissance and security for the sonic units. Although he died in 2013, Syracuse said her father was often featured in films and events about the Ghost Army.
Anybody should be recognized for something as great as this. I mean, this was really big part of American history, and it was shushed for so long.
It was an emotional moment for these families to witness their fathers, husbands, and grandfathers finally getting the recognition they deserved. In all the stories told about these men, the one word that kept popping up was proud.
That's not a story you see every day.
Yeah, it's awesome that they finally get honored. They were heroes that had to keep it secret.
Yeah, and the U.S. Army estimates that the Ghost Army saved between 15,000 and 30,000 service members.
Wow, yeah, what a service they did to the U.S. All right, looks like men's best friend, moving on to a different story now, is also dog's best friend.
The Isle of Man's Douglas Coast Guard rescue team says a dog helped his golden retriever friend who was struggling in the water.
The black Newfoundland dog was able to get the attention of a Good Samaritan. That person took a boat into the harbor and rescued the dog.
Douglas Coast Guard Rescue arrived a bit later to help out. The two dogs were reunited after the rescue and sent home with their owners.
How sweet. What a smart little guy.
Yeah.
Look at him. Oh, he must be freezing.
Dogs are good swimmers.
That's true. But, still, the Newfoundland dog saw his buddy in the water and was like, need to help. But they're actually known to be very protective of their family. So I guess that doesn't just apply to being a guard dog.
That's good.
Awesome. All right. We have to wrap up our show right here, but be sure to stay tuned for NTD's News Today broadcast at 11 a.m. Eastern Time coming up. And for round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.